you're not comfortable, thank you. So if you're happy to stay on camera, that would be great. But if you feel like you'd want to be off camera, just take the camera off. That's absolutely fine. So we'll talk about what feelings are. We'll talk about how you know you experience a feeling. This may sound obvious, but you'd be surprised that there is more to it than sort of meets the eye, but also why you're experiencing a feeling. You will learn a particular tool, a technique to chart your feelings so you can understand the clues that they're giving you. We will also look at what stops you doing self-care, and then we'll go into an exercise. We'll then talk about why allowing feelings to take over or avoiding them altogether, so that's engulfing or blocking, is unhelpful. And then how everyone has a feeling style and what influences yours. What's your feeling style about? And then finally, we'll talk about why bothering to learn and do your first aid at all. Why is this a good idea? And then some next steps. So then let's start with what are feelings. So we often think feelings are just emotions, but actually one of the beauties of the English language is that it applies to both physical sensations and emotions. So you go, I feel pain, I feel happy, I feel anxious, I feel like I've got a headache, because feelings really are interconnected. That what we feel in our body, we feel in our emotions, we feel in our heart. And so really recognizing that feelings is something that you work with or you experience across your experiences. It isn't just emotions or isn't just sensations. And actually then we bring in kind of thoughts as well, because it's always that mind, heart and body. So really seeing feelings across those different aspects, if you like. And then one of my key mantras, which is that it's always more helpful to be curious than critical. So because the main thing here is that actually feelings are information. And if you don't know what your feelings are, you don't know how to respond to them, then you are unlikely to be able to take the constructive action in terms of moving forward. If you, for example, you will feel pain. So let me just go to the next slide. So while you're experiencing a feeling, you'll feel pain, you'll feel hunger. It's also feelings like trust or fear or feeling enoughness. They're information to let you know what's a good idea and what isn't a good idea, to let you know that you need to eat or that you need to stop to tend to the pain. And often people will let me know, it's like, I don't do feelings. I'm not really into feelings. And I'm like, well, you probably do feelings more than you realize. So the classic thing is about when you're buying a house or you go into a new property for rent, you know, you may think that you've got a very rational criteria for why you're doing that. But actually, you will probably know within a few seconds of walking into that house whether you're going to move in there or not. You have an instinctive response. The second thing that we often sort of don't realize of how important feelings are is when we go on a date. We go on a date with somebody and it might be, let's say it's a blind date. Somebody has set you up with a friend who they say is perfect for you on paper, or like you've seen, you know, on one of the dating apps, everything about them is just right. But then you meet up and the chemistry is just off. And that's the feeling that lets you know that. And we often don't realize how strong and how instinctive those feelings are. And actually that how important it is to take them seriously. The same applies like you go into a meeting that there's something just not right. And then it's not until after the meeting or further down the line that you realize actually this was not helpful or not constructive. So recognizing that actually feelings show up more in our lives than we give them credit for, and they give us a bigger steer than we give them credit for. So then how do you know you're experiencing a feeling? So this is something we call the feeling chart, and it's in the First Aid for Feelings manual. You'll be doing this in the group exercise in a minute. And the invitation is to look at the thoughts, the tone of voice, the emotion, the focus, the posture, and the sensation. So if you imagine, it's like a doctor is coming in and they're kind of doing a bit of, let's chart what's going on. So whatever you're feeling, you know, whatever experience you're having, the feeling you're having will have those 6 components. So we're looking at the exercise, we're looking at what's stopping you. So let's take, for example, that I don't have enough time. That's a classic one that I often hear. I don't have time for self-care. Yeah. So that's the words. I don't have time. That's the words. Then let's look at the tone of voice. The tone of voice is often rushed. It's often dismissive. It's like, well, it's like, I don't have time. We're just going to move on. There's kind of an urgency to the tone of voice. If we look at the emotion of it, the emotion of what's stopping you, I don't have time, is there often a sense of contraction, of constriction. There's often kind of a dark feeling to it. We can feel a bit almost like hemmed in. The focus is often about the immediate future. So focus is always about where you are in terms of time. Is it in the past? Is it in the future? Is it in the present? So the focus is very much in the immediate future. Either my to-do list is just so big, it's so long, I haven't got time for it. The posture that goes with it is often quite a little bit hunched. We're kind of almost like bracing ourselves going into the future. And then also what the posture is, but the posture can be, our chin is a little bit down. So I don't know if you do a little experiment with me. If you just move your chin a little bit up, yeah, and then you move it just so it's level, straight forward. And then if you move it a little bit down, and just notice how it changes the feeling your experiences. So often the chin factor in the I haven't got time is either a little bit down, it's like sort of bracing ourselves into the future, or it's a bit sort of like I'm keeping my head above water, I'm almost drowning. Yeah, so it can be really interesting how this one part of our body can let us know what feeling we're in. Is also one we can then tilt, which you'll learn further. We won't cover that in the webinar today because we haven't got time, but it's one hack you can take straight away. And then the last one is about sensations. What are the sensations in your body? Are you feeling cold? Often adrenaline can really bump up our heat or make us feel cold. So when we feel we haven't got time, there's stress, there's adrenaline involved. And so we can either feel a bit chilly or we can feel too hot, it's like overwhelmed. So those 6 components of states really map the feeling of I haven't got time. And that's the feeling that's stopping you doing your self-care. And then we'll do some Sherlocking. That's its own exercise, but I just wanted to make you aware of it. We'll be sharing it in our social media over the next coming weeks, but also obviously it's in the First Aid for Feelings manual. But just to give you a bit of a hack now, it's the purposeful process of following the clues that your feelings are giving you to help you understand the information they contain to lead you to a more helpful choice. So the key message here is to get curious. And then, of course, it's more helpful to be curious than critical. If we go back to the previous clue there, where were we? Here, it's more helpful. So it's about being compassionate as well as bringing in that curiosity. So then let's move on to what stops you doing your self-care. So we've already talked about the first one, I haven't got time. So in general, what stops you is a belief. It's a habit, sort of habit energy. It's the habit of, I tend to always tell myself I haven't got time, but it can also be the context. It can be the culture that you're in, cultural messages, or it can be context in terms of, for example, war, or like, for example, in Iceland now, there's an imminent volcanic eruption, so that's likely to mean that you're not prioritizing self-care. Or like people in Brittany and France, they were without electricity for over a week. So that kind of context can really shift what's going on in your day. But more often, it's the habit or the belief that's stopping you doing self-care. So let's look at what is there in addition to other, to what's I haven't got time. There's also the belief other people are more important than me and more important than self-care. I don't deserve to be cared for. Some people struggle to know, what does it even mean, or how do I do it? These are skills, so I don't know how to do it. Also, what can stop you is if I do self-care, other people will be angry with me or upset. They'd be like, well, I'm more important than you. Why aren't you helping me? Why are you doing something for yourself? There's also the fear that if I do self-care, I might just get lazy and do anything. I'll just go and watch movies all day, or how do I get myself out of it if I get stuck there? There's also that very old-fashioned belief. I tend to think of them as the medieval belief. It's a bit like those beliefs where really clever people believed the earth was flat. And now we're like, how could you believe that? And I do think that this belief, self-care is selfish, is one of those medieval beliefs. It's something from last century. There's a context to it, but actually we really know that's so out of date. If you haven't got enough oxygen, if you're not cared for well enough, then you're not going to be able to help anybody else. And then also one, this is my turn will come, which is an interesting one. It's like, I know I'm important, so I'm going to honor that, but I'm just going to do it later. So I'm just going to defer self-care to later on. And it's really interesting how often that belief will show up. So I don't know if any of those are resonating with you, or is something else that you realize is stopping you, but it can be helpful to have this a bit of a shorthand. So let's then move on to then the exercise. Yeah. So the exercise, we're going to, Stephen is going to put you into breakout rooms. You'll have 15 minutes for this exercise. And the 6 components of state that you're going to get curious about are the thoughts that are stopping you, the tone of voice you're saying them in, the emotion that goes with it, the posture, remember the chin factor, and the focus, the position in time, the immediate future. So if we're always firefighting, we're always looking at what's right in front of us, we're not realizing that further down the line, if we don't do our self-maintenance, if we don't do our self-care, like a car or a plant or a house, sooner or later, something is going to break. Yeah. So help what the feeling, identify what the feeling is that you are, that's stopping you. And you can help each other in that group to kind of go, well, this is kind of how it feels for me. I'm not quite sure what the feeling is. And you might be able to help each other identify what it is. So when you go into the group, take maybe a minute or two to just get your bearings, say hi to each other. It's likely that you've never met each other. So there's always a bit like, not quite sure who you are. And it's that kind of go gently, maybe talk a little bit about your experience, share something, be a bit brave, but also if there's something sort of bigger and deeper, that might be helpful to bring that. You're always welcome to email me next week. We can see what we can do to support any deeper work, but just gently having a look, getting curious, and remember being kind to yourself. And then using that feeling chart that we've talked about to help you, or maybe ask each other, so when you feel like this, how does that show up in your body? Or what are the thoughts that go with that? And then finally, please nominate a person to feedback, sort of general highlights from the group work that you've been doing, because we'll have group feedback when you come back to this space. And that group feedback will not be recorded, so you're absolutely safe. But also, if you want to say to the person that you nominate, please don't share this bit, then that's absolutely fine too, being respectful of your own boundaries. Stephen, if you could then... that takes us here. Yeah, great. Thanks, Stephen. So I talk about kind of being either sort of a blocker or an engulfer. These are the 2 ends of a spectrum in terms of feeling styles. So we all have, or all seem to have, as far as I can tell, the way we relate to our feelings. So feeling style is basically about your relationship with your feelings. Do you get engulfed by them that just take over? And then, so there's like a lack of respite. There's even, you experience a lack of motivation. You feel overwhelmed by your feeling. You feel stuck in your feelings, like there's no way out. So that's on that engulfer side of that spectrum. On the blocker side of the spectrum, there's like we kind of go into lots of working, or we go into rescuing lots of people, so we don't have to feel our own feelings. It's much easier to rescue other people than ourselves. Or do we go into consumption, where we're consuming food or substances, or TV programs, or any kind of thing we consume. Or that kind of, the final point is attachment to doing. We do live in the Western culture in particular. We are very attached to doing. We give a lot of status to doing. And if we're doing lots of doing, then we often feel I'm a good person, I do lots of doing. Or we give kind of credit. Oh, they are so productive. Look at everything that they achieve, all the output they achieve in their day. They must be a very good or important person. So it can be interesting to just knock that belief sort of and rattle it a bit, going like, is that actually true? Is that actually helpful? Because if we think about some of that, if I do lots of doing, kind of what am I not doing? I tend to be not being. Because again, it's the Bananarama theme tune. It's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. If I'm doing lots of doing with kind of speed and kind of really focused on the doing rather than focused on the me being present with the doing, it creates a very different reality. And when we are using doing to block our feelings, we are basically not being. Yeah, we're just the next task list or the next to-do list. So that can be an interesting way to just get curious about, what's my relationship with feelings? What's my feeling style? So, and often you have a gut instinct. Yeah, I'm more of an engulfer, more of a blocker. You might not be a really kind of extreme. Some people are on one side of the spectrum or the other. They're practically paralyzed. They struggle to do anything because feelings are just so overwhelming and so all-consuming. Or all the way on the blocker side where you just, you're just not feeling anything. And I remember working with somebody quite a few years ago and asking him, so how does that feel? And he was like, well, I don't know. How am I supposed to feel about that? I was like, well, good, bad, let's start with that. And he suddenly realized that he actually did not know. He had no reference for his feeling. He'd been blocking all of his life. He came from a long line of people who were blocking their feelings. So he got this very strong cultural inheritance. And he was an engineer. He was in his 60s, project manager, engineer. He'd been just very, very skilled at doing. But he said, I feel like I've just been pushed into this life drawing class with a chalk and a piece of paper, and I have no idea what to do. And I thought it was very interesting that he came in with that reference, because for him, like the body, particularly a naked body, was just like, apart from like British, so nudity is a bit of a no-no. So it was really interesting. So for him, we really had to start with baby steps, the ABC of feelings. But it's rare that people are that far on either side of the spectrum. Most of us are somewhere in between, but it can be helpful just to get a sense of where you are. So there's a bit of a footnote here, which is that we can have different style in different domains. So we can have a different relationship in work or at home. It tends to be those two domains. It's rare that we are different, like between family and friends, although that can happen. But it mostly is between our occupation, if we have that, or work, and then there's a personal domain. So that can just be an interesting thing to bear in mind. So with that, I'm gonna stop sharing. Oh no, we're gonna go into just the exercise instruction. So for the group, we're going to ask you to get curious about what your feeling style is. And, as you get curious about it, what do you notice about your habit energy? And then the second point is then, well, with that observation of your feeling style, how does that affect your ability to do self-care? So if you're more on the engulfer side, doesn't mean you get so stuck in your overwhelm that self-care just becomes like, impossible. It's like a lethargy. I just can't motivate myself to do it at all. Or if your feeling style is more blocking, is it that the to-do list is always so big that you never make it on that? So that habit energy of doing never gives you access or respite to connect more into being. And particularly those of you who are kind of maybe in the consuming, like consuming content, consuming food, consuming substances, that can be an interesting one to look at, particularly because or the rescuing other people, because that's a good thing, right? And so actually, and also when we stop or reduce our rescuing of other people, they may get fed up with us. They're like, well, you've been rescuing me my whole life. What do you mean you're going to prioritize yourself? So that is an interesting one to just check in with, because when we start to do something different, people around us will often have an opinion of that. They will go, great, it's great to finally see you doing something that feels helpful to you. Or people may be like, hang on a minute, no, I'm your most important person. So just noticing that those aspects can be on that side of things. So as always, great, thank you, Stephen. So then why learn first aid for feelings? Now that you've learned, you got some insight into what's stopping you, you've got the first tool, which is the feeling chart. Let's then look at, well, how can you respond to it? What can you do? And the first thing is always about first aid for feelings. Just like medical first aid, watch the thing you reach for. So first aid for feelings is a set of tools and techniques to help you. It is designed to support you to become more skillful in responding to yourself and others. It's a set of tools to reduce feelings escalating, to kind of spiral out of control, or you start to do something sort of unhelpful or destructive. And it's also a support for your personal development and sort of self-care, both physically, mentally, and socially. But then also being really clear on what it isn't. It's not a cure. Like the chin factor is not going to cure cancer, but it is going to help you just hack a little bit in that moment, take the edge of it, make it easier. It's also not a replacement for clinical or medical support. You know, when you need medical support, that is really important to seek medical help. It's not clinical support. It's not therapeutic. It's not seeing a therapist. You know, it's very much a self-help in the moment thing. And it certainly is not a fix. So like Nadia's question, you know, the short answer is yes, but it's not a fix in that moment. And it's not particularly in our dynamics with other people and interactions with others. So it's just helpful to bear that in mind. And finally, that is not switching from bad feelings to good feelings. I'm always really keen that it's not about being positive or negative. It's about actually what is helpful in this moment. Then the next one is in terms of what you've learned, what we've covered in the webinar today. So the main things is the feeling style, the feeling chart, the different components and why that matters. And then the feeling style that you've learned more about in the Sherlocking you've been doing today, getting curious. And then finally, I'm going to finish with the slide asking you to email me your results. But just because I'm aware of the time, I want to go to the last one next, which is in terms of next steps. So what insight can you take from today, just in case you have to finish right on the minute? How will you take that insight forward? Who can help you do that? If it's me, sure, get in touch. If it's a friend, if it's a colleague, if it's a family member, who can help you take that one step forward on your journey to doing more self-care? And then it is a way you can get more resources. If you sign up for the helpful newsletter, we'll share blogs. There's always a you recommend section in the newsletter where other people share tips and hacks on what can be helpful. We'll also share events like future webinars that are free. We've got loads of free resources as well on Insight Timer, which is an app that you can download. You can buy the access where you can get the First Day for Feelings course, but there are free meditations and free live events every Thursday at 5:30. And then there's also the First Day for Feelings manual, so you can find that on the website. So on that note, just on that last minute, it's coming back to just your final feedback. So if you check in with yourself, how confident do you feel now, depending on where you were before, or in relation to where you were before, in reading, in responding to your feelings? And then in terms of in your ability to do self-care, and then just what this experience has been like for you. Primarily do it for yourselves. Jot down those numbers and those notes for you. If you are able and you want to send them to me, I'd love to see where you're at, but it's not a requirement. So I'm just going to stop share then. Right, so we've come to the end. It's 12:30. I want to say a big thank you for joining me today. Thank you for being interested in your own self-care. It's my genuine belief that the more of us that know our own self-care, the easier we can make it, not just for ourselves, but for people around us. So genuinely, slowly, gradually, we are creating this ripple effect of helping all of us feel just that little bit better. And if there's anything, as always, stay in touch, send me an email. But otherwise, I wish you a really lovely rest of your day. And there we go, 12:30. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good